Welcome everybody to the MiniMapCast. This is minimap.com.au's weekly games podcast, your favorite weekly games podcast. Today, we are joining you as Kerry.
Oh, fuck's sake. Forgot about that.
Yeah, I don't know. The thinking about it, it's not really a joke that works that well unless you've already watched the show. So in case you haven't, my name's Kerry, that's Jeremy. I just put our names together as a joke.
Yeah.
Because someone told me I should.
Yes, yeah.
And I don't remember who it was.
As it turns out, we're very easy to influence as people directly on camera.
Yeah, basically it goes like this. You tell us that you listen to the show, and we're like, oh, wow, thank you.
Yeah, we'll do anything
have
to keep
any
you.
suggestion for the show? I'm like, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was a B. Sam
Yeah.
reckons it was B that told us to do
Which is
that.
hilarious because B definitely does not listen to the show. Because I work with B, they get enough of me at work and also sometimes on Discord.
That's true. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah, we should specifically not do what B asks us to do. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't have told you who it was until we did it then anyway, so there we are.
Yeah.
Jeremy.
Kerry.
What's the biggest whitetail spider you've ever seen?
Oh, probably one at a zoo.
I'm not saying how big is the biggest spider you've ever seen. I'm not saying give me the name of the biggest spider you've seen.
Harold.
What was the date? What was the weather?
I don't know. Probably about the size of my hand.
A whitetail?
Yeah. Wait, am I thinking of the same? Oh, I might be thinking of like one of those like wolf spiders.
Are you thinking of like a huntsman?
No, but I don't know.
You're not thinking of a whitetail.
I don't often think about spiders intentionally.
I mean, neither do I.
I hate them actually.
Fair enough.
I am a person that explicitly does not like spiders.
Yeah, I kind of am too.
Yeah.
I'm better at dealing with them when they need to be dealt with in the house than I used to be. Basically, since I moved out, and it was either going to be me or Sam, and like sometimes Sam's asleep, or sometimes like I don't want to be a child.
Yeah, right. Why? What did you meet one?
Yeah, last night I was on the armchair. Fen was on my lap. Sam was lying down on the couch to sleep, and Griffin was sitting with Sam on the couch. And all of a sudden, Griff gets down and is like, "What's that? What?
Oh, no.
What?" And I'm like, and I'm pinned, and I'm like craning my neck, looking around the like fast food bag, and I'm like, "What is that?" And then I see it. I'm like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah,
I said, "Oh, Sam, get up! Sam, I'm stuck! Sam, help!" And in hindsight, I really should have picked up the other cat and stood up and dealt with it.
Yeah, right.
Oh.
Yeah, these are little. Yeah, right.
They are normally little. Yeah, they're normally like the size of like one part of your index finger. You know, like the tip of your index finger.
I've closed the tab.
I would. Looking up spiders is always worse than encountering them.
It's completely. It's always
stop giving me this macro photography. I want a photo of the spider at about 1.5 meters distance in the corner of the room. That's what I want as a photo of the spider.
No, I don't want that.
Not this scientific, like phantom flex slow-mo hyper focus detail, like. Bleh.
Yeah, okay. I disagree with you there only because I hate there's one thing that is worse than seeing a spider in your bedroom, and this
is a content warning for spiders, I guess.
Yeah.
For those, if you've made it this far.
Yeah. What's worse is no longer seeing that spider.
Yes. Yeah, that's bad. We had that.
Yeah.
We had that happen with Daddy Longlegs recently. And Sam was like, "Oh, that's fine. It's good. It's good for the plants nearby. They'll take care of the random flying bugs that'll eat it."
Those are fine. I'm happy to leave those.
But we had our Daddy Longlegs disappear, and Sam was saying, "Oh, that might have been after we saw the whitetail yesterday." So I was like, that might have been the whitetail.
Right.
But yeah, Sam was also mentioning that the one that Sam donated to the zoo was bigger than the one that we saw last night. Sam kept it for 3 days. Kept it for 3 days, then drove it drove it home from Ballarat. That's right, that was in Ballarat.
Right.
Because you knew someone at work, Sam, who worked at the zoo who would appreciate taking it to the zoo and then they could put it in the zoo.
Right. And like it's always good as well because they
named it Sam.
Oh, cute. They also they make anti-venom from spiders. That's like why it's so good to give them away. Like you literally are working against them.
You're helping.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, not in like a more in like helping us kind of way. It's not in like a
Yeah. Yes.
fuck you, spiders. You think you got us this time? We're gonna do you one better.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did not start the timer when I started the show. I'm just gonna hold this right-hand arrow button until it looks about good.
Yeah.
All right. Shall we get started?
Yeah, I reckon so.
Great. Everybody, thank you for listening. Thanks for sticking through that rambling intro. I always enjoy our rambling intros, but it's not the main reason we're here. The main reason we're here is to talk about video games. We're going to do that like we do every other week. Not every other week as in every 2 weeks, but every week that isn't this one, as in every week. Weekly. You can catch us Tuesday every week on any podcast platform of your choice. That's right. We're locking in Tuesday. No longer Friday. You can now catch us on Tuesday on podcast platforms and on YouTube.
Even earlier,
Jeremy's saying. We're putting in a new workflow where we basically push it live pretty quickly after we record the show live. When do we record the show live, you're asking? Well, that's a good question to ask, considering that you can catch us recording the show live on Twitch every week on Monday, 5:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. So yeah, you can watch us record the show on Monday. You can hang out in the chat, in the pre-show, in the break, in the middle of the show, at the end of the show. What are we doing in the post-show today, Jeremy? You said that we're going to talk about how we're going to tackle Game of the Year in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So that's something to look forward to. So that sounds like something you want to...
Ideas to spitball.
Yeah, and we'll bounce some ideas off a chat. So if that sounds like something a conversation you want to be around for, you should be in the next live stream. Be in the chat with us. Like I said before, I don't know if I did say this, it's twitch.tv/minimapau for Twitch. Our other social accounts, if you want to keep up to date with when our episodes go live on all of the other platforms, they're all available. That's Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. All of them are at MiniMapAU, Twitch as well. We would mention Hive like we did last week, but their servers have been down for about half a week, so
yeah.
we'll bring them up again when they're back up again. But we are on Hive as well. That's a great way to know when our episodes go live or what the topic is for each one. For example, last week was all about talking about our final impressions on God of War Ragnarok, since Jeremy had finished it. We also spoke about what the best games of the best games were from the year of 2009. Our favorites, where we were at that point in time. That was a really interesting discussion. I really enjoyed it. And next week, we'll be discussing the Game Awards. That's happening at the end of this week. Next week, we'll discuss it. We'll discuss the winners. We'll discuss any of the big announcements. We'll discuss how we felt about the presentation and the show and the pacing. And yeah, it's something to look forward to. Hopefully, there's some announcements for us to discuss. It's a bit strange with the Keeley presentations at the moment because there's 3 of them in a year. I feel like a lot of the oomph he has been diluted across those 3 events now. And so I kind of never know what to expect from him anymore. I never know if we're going to get Elden Ring or if we're just going to get like a Godfall reveal. You know?
Look, I think it's pretty safe to say that we're going to get the new Kojima thing.
Oh yeah,
I think he's over there.
He's in the States. Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think it's about time for that.
Yeah.
And yeah,
we're 3 years post Death Stranding,
and there was something else we were going to get that was being thrown around, and I've forgotten what it was.
He's been teasing stuff. He's been posting posters for weeks.
Yeah, there was a physical poster
like ramping up.
There was a physical poster at PAX for his new thing,
like at PAX Oz.
Yes.
What?
Yeah, like there was.
That's wild.
Yes, there was like a physical thing for what his new thing is. Like,
at what booth?
Sitting randomly outside of the expo hall. Yeah. It was so funny. There was something else that's going to be there that I've forgotten what it was now, but there'll be some stuff. Oh, the Jedi Fallen Order new one.
Yes, if we get that, I will be very stoked if we get that.
It will be there. It just will be there.
Well, the rumors are it's targeting. Anyway, this is all discussion for next week, but that's what we're looking forward to, everybody. Man, I'm ready for that game. I'm ready for more Cal. I'm ready for more Star Wars Dark Souls, Star Souls, Dark Wars.
I hope it's polished this time. I really hope it's like, I hope they nail it. I really hope they do.
That came out again, same time as Death Stranding. So that's been 3 years. We'll see. I guess. We also wanted to say thank you to Shook for letting us use the Moog Model D Improv as the music for the MiniMapCast. You can listen to more of Shook's music at shook.bandcamp.com. And lastly, if you wanted to help keep the lights and mics on here at MiniMap, if you wanted to support us monetarily, you could do that by becoming one of our patrons. It helps us to continue to do this. You can ask us questions to answer on the podcast, and it's as cheap as a latte with oat milk. How did I just say latte?
Yeah.
As a latte with I feel like I messed up the.
I don't think you have.
It felt bad. It felt off.
Nah, you got it.
You can do all of that at patreon.com/minimapau for $5. Now, Jeremy.
Kerry.
We decided this week we're not going to start with our topic because it's a bit of an evergreen one. We're going to talk about the games we've been playing. And I'd love to hear about your experience yesterday morning during the Fortnite Fractured event. That's right, everybody. It's time for another Fortnite. Is it a Fortnite? Yep. I think this is 2 weeks.
Yeah,
okay, we did it.
Yep.
We did it, everybody.
I looked. I looked. Yeah.
And you said, it. Oh, yeah, not this week.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I have things to say about Fortnite, but only as it pertains to Chapter 3, Season 4. I did not play the event yesterday.
Yeah.
The chapter season ending event, and I have not played any of Chapter 4 today.
Yeah, neither have I. But I did. So okay. It's yesterday morning. It is Sunday morning.
Sunday.
I wake up nice and early because I want to watch the Socceroos play in the World Cup. For those,
you want to watch the Socceroos lose in the World Cup?
Yes. We got to the knockout stage. Once again, always the furthest we've ever gotten in the World Cup is the first knockout stage. Played great. One little mistake, unfortunately, cost us a goal that did in the end lose us the game.
Right.
Very, very proud of our boys. They did a great job.
Hey, if I'm hearing a lot of that when people talk about the World Cup right now, of like, hey, they played their hearts out. That was a great game. They didn't win, but man, it was great. And that kind of solidarity is not the kind of thing you hear about with soccer. So that's awesome. Yeah,
like I think like just to go on a quick tangent, I do love that, except when I don't. Only because like there is part of me that I love that when they fucking try and they're up against Argentina, right? Like this is a good Argentina.
It's the World Cup.
Yeah, but this is like the World Cup in the past few years has dramatically increased the amount of countries they let in per competition, which has made some people be able to get in.
The skill difference.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry.
And
stop talking over you.
No, it's fine. The Argentinian team that we're fighting, that we played against last night, they're a very strong team. You know, like it is Lionel Messi's probably last World Cup.
Right.
Like he's like, and so at this point he is aged to the point of him being the best minded version of himself. I think is a pretty good way to describe it. They're a tough team, and they did outplay us. That being said, they did a great job. What I don't like is when every time we play, no matter what, we lose, and I'm still proud, and I'm like, sometimes I just need him to win.
Sometimes you need to be upset.
Well, no, sometimes I need him to just get over the line. Like at some point, it's like they did it, and they just couldn't get there. Like sometimes I just need him to get there.
I think in a setting like this, it's appropriate. Because they've been training for this.
Yeah, like I think it depends. It entirely depends on the way I think the team has been run. I think the team has been run quite well this time. That like this was the best outcome. So like, look, good on them. They did us proud, our boys. Anyway, that finished.
Rancher Jeremy for a second.
That finished at about 7:50, which means I had 10 minutes to get on my computer because at 8 o'clock was the Fortnite Fractured event, which was the first time I was ever paying attention in the scene for one of Fortnite's big events. They only do these every time a season ends.
No, chapter.
Yeah, right,
Chapter.
okay. Yeah, right, okay. It's I never remember which one is first. That's right. It's chapter 4, season 1 is what we're in now.
Yes.
Yes. Which
I remember talking. I don't remember if we spoke about it on the podcast. I reckon we did.
We did.
But I remember the three of us, you, me, and June, on a recording day, we were watching like recordings of people live streaming the first end of chapter event.
Yeah.
And they were doing things like rocket launches that changed the map at the end of seasons during that first chapter. But then it got to the end of that chapter. And so this was like 2.5 years after season 1 of Fortnite.
And there was like a few days where no one could play the game because they were doing they were doing all the changeovers, and it was like a big deal because Fortnite was the single biggest thing happening at that moment, right? I
think it had started to wane a little bit. I think it was on a little bit of a decline because remember that's 2.5 years.
Kinda but that was still the era of of the floss being the biggest thing, Ninja at the New York Times New Year's Eve celebration, right? Like there was a lot of things happening around there.
The thing that I loved about it though was how they contextualized it in game, and how they presented it, because it was this big event in the world that you could go into, and run around in as the map ended, and the whole game got sucked into a black hole, like. People's HUD, the characters, the map went into a black hole, and then the game was there was nothing to interact with in the game for the next 3 days. It was like, where's Fortnite?
Like if you logged in, I think you were just falling through the universe as like a come back later sort of splash screen.
Yeah, there's nothing here.
Which was pretty exciting. They did a similar thing this time, where you could you can join a playlist. Which was like the event playlist. So there was no combat. There was no you had to join a battle royale and hope you made it to the end while it was happening. Otherwise, you get stuck on the menu. Which I think is what happened the first one. I think I remember people getting.
It was something like that.
Yeah, some people if you got killed while you're in the final matches, then you missed out on the event, which would be pretty sad. So yeah. And so you join in and so I launched the game and it says queue, you've got 15 minutes before you can join the match. I'm before you can launch the game. I'm before the menu, I had to enter a queue because they were getting some people.
Wow.
Yeah, right. And I was like, oh shit. And so I quickly pulled it up on Twitch, and I'm like, am I gonna miss this because I didn't turn on my computer in time? And the answer was no. There was an additional 10-minute buffer after the event went live, which was a good call. So made it in there with about 7 minutes to spare. And I sat on a floating rock in the universe while a CRT had a 7-minute counter sitting on it with 2 other randoms because it put you in a team for no reason.
Yeah.
And then the event started. The event was they have a little cutscene inside the game of Brie Larson talking some lore stuff. I don't know. And then they triggered a 0 point event or whatever, which is their in-game multiverse thing stuff.
Yeah. I watched the recording of this later in the day, and listening to all of the words and the supposed lore, I was like,
what is this?
Either you guys are really smelling your own farts, or rather you guys are really liking the smell of your own farts. That's the saying. Or you're just putting it in here because you know, like a young audience is just going to eat this stuff up because you've put it here.
Look, the story is serviceable enough in a game that is actually a battle royale that I think it's fine.
Yeah.
That like it never gets in the way, and that's important.
Yes, that is important. But it's there if you want it.
It's there if you want it. Yeah, and so then like a black hole happens, and like the you sort of get sucked into like this like in between realm, and this singularity event that is happening in the center of these like floating rocks is slowly pulling parts of a map against the rocks that you're in and expanding this map that you're on.
And you're kind of floating in space. You're all kind of suspended in midair.
Yeah, so like at the beginning, yeah, and then they let you run around this small little thrown together part of the old map, where like you're doing like mini games. You're like going around and like collecting like these like little floating orbs, and you're going up to some NPCs that are sitting around there, and it's like, oh, like, you know, show me a chicken or whatever. So you go and grab a chicken and you walk over and show them the chicken, and he gives you some more currency. And then it's like, oh, like build me a snowman. And so you like get the snowman ball, and then you walk it over to where the snowman sits, and says, oh, there you go. Or like there was like telescopes, and like, oh, like you look through the telescope and, you know, see if you can find this thing floating in the ether from the old map. And so you look around and you see it and you get more currency. And then every 6 or so minutes, everyone then gets like floating back in space again, and then the world gets pulled further, and so you get more of the map, so you can do more and more mini games as you go. And you could also trade some of those currency for like some in-game items. There was an emote, I think. There was a skin, and there was something else as well. Like just a couple of things, like a beach ball. And yeah, and then like more and more parts, and like there are moments which I thought was legitimately cool where like the map is expanding while you're walking around, and so like they just like throw together like another big chunk of this like little area, like directly at you, and it crashes into where you're at, and then gives you another area to walk around, and there's more little mini game stuff. And this went for about half an hour, and then everybody gets floated up, and then, you know, then the reveal trailer happens, and you see the new island from afar, and, you know, Doom Guy is going to destroy a cacodemon while floating, and you see Geralt trying to get to his horse, Roach, and Mr. Beast is
Hulk
there.
on a bike.
Hulk on a bike. And then that was sort of it. They have like a couple of cool, like, you know, transitions of like, oh yeah, you're floating in space and you get sucked into a new area, you see some cool stuff, but like it was pretty boring.
Yeah.
It was like the mini games themselves were really not that interesting, and they weren't that fun to engage with.
It's interesting because I think they're responding to the criticism, because I remember when there was I think it was Chapter 2, Season 4 or something like that. There was do you remember the Galactus event? It was that one season where it was like entirely Marvel. That was the whole focus of the season. And the event of that season was you all on like a helicarrier, and you just kind of watched Galactus like get bigger on the horizon, and then someone shot something and he died, and you were all just there on a helicarrier watching. And I think they were. I was listening. I was having heard your brief description of it over Discord yesterday, and having watched it myself, I think they were trying to combat the critique and the feeling that some people might have of like, I could have just turned this on YouTube. I didn't need to be here for this.
Yeah, like, look, I think the issue is the stuff that they gave you to engage with. It felt like just like a toy, and it was kind of like, hey, like we're doing this thing, and it takes place over half an hour, so you need stuff to do.
Yeah. For
that 25 minutes that cutscenes aren't playing.
And they decided that was not to involve weapons.
Yeah, which is weird because they still gave you like the grapple gun, and they still like there were cannons like around like from the pirate ship area, and like there was still stuff you could do, but like you just couldn't shoot each other. There was no guns, there was no Fortnite part, there was no building. I don't really know what you do because they also don't want you to fail the event. but maybe like, you know, maybe have you run a gauntlet, and then if you fall off of it, then you get picked up and thrown forward or whatever. You get like helped, or you know, like maybe give me something like give me a falling through the universes, and we pick up Doom Guy out of the Doom universe, and we throw into the next area, and we pick up Geralt, you know, out of whatever the fuck those places are called. In The Witcher, what's the Witcher locations called?
There's Novigrad.
Yeah,
there's Skellige.
Any of those, right? Like pick him up.
Camorin.
Yeah. You know, there's All Might from the My Hero Academia, right? Like throw me a, you know, we pull him out of the My Hero universe or something. If you like, give me something that's a bit more like, oh, neat, like we're doing a thing here, as opposed to I'm sitting here engaging in the content that is there to keep me entertained while other stuff happens.
I am being kept busy.
Yeah. Or let me survive on the map, right? Like have a cool, like you go onto the world and it slowly gets sucked out. And depending on what part of the map you're on the other side of that, right? Like do you remember in Outer Wilds where you go through the black hole on what's it called? The hollow, Brutal Hollow, and then you come out of the white hole, and the reverse of Brutal Hollow gets thrown out the other side. Like, what if they did something like that, right? Where like depending on what part of the map you're on, you either see a lot of Brutal Hollow go through, or a lot of Brutal Hollow come out. They could do something like that.
Yeah, like maybe you could survey the new map from afar, but you couldn't get close enough to it yet because of a force field.
Yeah. And I think it's hard, right? Because they need to fit now like a longer period of time because there are so many people there, and if the event takes 5 minutes, and people are gonna like not engage with it because it's not enough time.
Also gonna miss it.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do. So that being said, I think what they did wasn't super great. So they should keep working on that. But you know, apparently the new stuff is cool. We were right where we like. I think we were right when we were talking about like, oh, like why do you reckon they did it early? Because this chapter didn't last very long in terms of time frame compared to the rest.
It was 4 seasons instead of 10.
And so we were like, okay, like what is? I also think that 10 is too long. I think that it's like when you think about the phrase season 9 and season 10 for the bigger thing to happen, like that takes a fucking long time. So like I think this was a good call to do it earlier, but we were thinking like, oh, I wonder why they've done it so early. And I had this theory that maybe they moved to Unreal 5 in this one and they wanted to get it out there. We found out that they'd actually been in Unreal 5 for a year, but this time they've moved to Unreal 5.1. So I think that is actually why they needed to get a new map in with all of the new changes, ray traced water effects, better lighting. That you can't.
Apparently, it looks really good.
Yeah, and it's not something you can immediately add to something that you're currently doing. You sort of need to build for that.
Yeah, I'm very excited to load it up at some point in the next 24, 48 hours.
Yeah, same.
See how my computer runs it, and or maybe even the console, and see how that runs as well.
Yeah, it's now going to actually start to look better on my console than it is on my PC.
Yep, which is great. It's good that they've done that, and they need to do that. It's interesting seeing these service games try to catch up, not necessarily, but get in line with the current generation stuff. They've got to build forward now.
Yeah,
to be like, oh yeah, we have to reward the people who want to keep playing this game and have decided to do that on their brand new system that they spent a bunch of money on. We have to reward them for choosing to continue to spend that time with us on our platform.
Yeah. So yeah, look, I'll probably still tune in for the next one if I have the time. I don't think I'm gonna make time for it next time. But you know, if I know I'm not doing anything the next day, I'll get up early and do it.
Yeah, totally. And apparently the new season's cool. I've only seen the trailer, but they've got some wild stuff in there. What was it? There's like a drone. There's like an Assassin's Creed Eagle.
Yeah, right.
Like Ghost Recon kind of drone thing. You could send it out and mark players.
That's fun.
Then there's this big gravity hammer that like sends you into the sky and comes crashing down. That
cool.
It looks cool.
Yeah, right.
I was looking at it, I was going, was this the thing that needed the new chapter? Was this the thing that needed the new chapter? Like, I was trying to like find it,
Yeah.
but I couldn't. Tell us about the rest of your week, Jeremy.
I might skip over. I played some more Stranger Paradise, but I might skip over it. Like I think I don't have enough to say aside from I think that game is actually really fun. I'm having a good time. I'm maxing out jobs.
Just like you were saying that you got really sucked into it all of a sudden.
Yeah, I came back and I stopped because there was an area that looked pretty boring. And I was like, oh, right. I don't really want to play this. And then I never went back. And I jumped back in, and that area actually not so long. These levels are actually shorter than I thought. I think it is better at the game by playing games that are sort of similar to it more recently. Like the Elden Ring. From Software games have actually made me better at this game because there's a lot of blocking and stuff.
Yeah, totally.
And different weapons as well. But yeah, like I'm maxing out a ton of jobs now, and I'm actually working towards the RPG aspect of the game as opposed to just experiencing the story, which is what I was doing last time. I'm having a very good time. It's really fun. Game's still ugly as sin, but like it's fucking fun.
Right.
I keep thinking like, fuck, this is like this game came out this year. It's so bad.
It's like playing Saints Row this year as well.
No, it's worse than Saints Row. It's worse than Saints Row.
Okay.
But I've been playing a lot of fucking Marvel Snap.
Yeah, man.
Let me tell you, this is maybe the game. This is maybe my Battle Pass game for the next foreseeable future, where every month I'm maxing out.
I was gonna say that makes me sad for you because that's not like a quarterly Battle Pass. It's a monthly battle pass.
It's a monthly $15 Battle Pass. The thing
is it still like Is it still like $12?
It's $15.
$15.
Yeah, it's expensive, and it's also not worth it. But the thing is, buying it early doesn't get you anything, which is bad, except the fact that I can just max it out and then buy it on the final day and not feel like I wasted time not getting it early.
Right.
So that's good in a way. There is less fear of missing out because if I didn't, if you
could just opt in on the last day if you look back and be like, yeah, I want those, and I will get those when I pay now.
Yeah. They've also updated the progression system in this game a little bit. So there was an update the other day where up until this point, there was only 3 pools of cards, depending on your collection event. So you would get no matter what, you would always get pool 1 first. So any card that's in pool 1 is all the cards you would get first. And then once you hit a certain collection level, that determines that you will then start to pull pool 2 cards. The reason that's important is because pool 2 and then pool 3 onwards get more and more complex. Those cards tend to have a higher capacity of being better. You can seriously break the game. Yeah, very easy to mess up, and will honestly overload you with the amount of complexity that you could possibly build.
So it's like a higher skill floor.
Yes, and so, which I think is wonderful, because what that also does is when you play the game, you only play against players who are also in the same pool as you, regardless of your rank. So you can be you can get to platinum, you can get to the highest competitive rank possible, but you're not going to start, you're not going to get there by playing against players who are at a lower collection level than you. So you're not going to suddenly chime in and beat a bunch of the newbies who have only got the first 25 cards. With the cards that you've been having for the past 4 months. Really good, really good. So there was an update the other day where they've added 2 more pools, which is really cool. Tons of new cards, tons of stuff to work towards. They've also changed the way the progression works. So they've added another currency, which is always like, ooh, but this currency, you can now buy cards with this currency, but it's not like it is less pay to win. Because of this pool, you don't choose which cards you want. What you do is every, I think 6 hours, a card will rotate in, 1 card, and you can buy it or you can wait. What you can also do, however, is you can pin that card. So you can say, oh, that's a really good card. I really want that card. I don't have the currency right now, but I'm going to pin it. So new cards won't rotate in. So you've saved it there for when you have the currency. The downside is you might miss one that's potentially better, but if it's the one you really want, You got it. You got it there when you're ready. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's a risk reward thing. Kind of, it feels a little more like gambling in a way, because it's like, oh, you might miss something great. Be careful.
Yes and no. Because you don't know what you've missed.
Yeah, but and people who have a fear of missing out.
But it's also client side. It's not everyone has this in their shop. Like the shop, I think, is maybe one of the most interesting things. Is everything in there is client side, because all the variants you choose, all of the upgraded.
It's based on your deck.
It's based on your deck. They're not going to give you a variant for a card you don't have, and because you
Apex.
Yeah, because you get a new card. Because every time you get a new card, it's from the pool that you're currently in, but it's randomly from the pool you're currently in. Everyone's deck is going to be slightly different. Therefore, it's not like, hey, everyone, jump on really quick and grab Wong. It's, oh my god, in my shop, I finally got Wong. I can buy Wong right now. Wong's a great card.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, I quite like it as well. I think it's a good middle ground.
And it saves you from the I froze my shop and then the next day it's like, oh, the new Star-Lord card is there. I'm like, oh no, because I froze my shop, I'm not gonna get well, I just should buy this one now, but I'll just spend real money and get more currency and buy this one now so I can have more tomorrow. So yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I think it's also just worth mentioning very quickly as well that I'm currently putting together my Game of the Year list. It's on there.
Right next to Stranger of Paradise.
We'll see.
Yeah. Man, I'm a bit scared of Game of the Year this year. I think I haven't looked back to this year, but I think I also I'm pretty aware of how much I haven't played yet.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like I've made a list of, like, I've got 2 games that I want to play this year that I want to finish. One of them is Norco. The other one is and one of them is like, if I can get to it, and that is Sonic. But I'm also not concerned with Sonic potentially being on my Game of the Year list, so that's why it's lower than Norco, which might actually make it on there.
Maybe we should do like an account thing. You can log in on mine, so you don't have to buy it.
Oh, maybe we'll see how we go.
I'm down. Save you that money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to finish, or at least get a decent bit further into Forbidden West. I need to reinstall that game this week, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, the other game I installed with that kind of concern in mind was Sifu, which I'm bringing up this week because I finished it finally. I was going to bring it up last week, but I knew I hadn't finished it yet, so I knew I was going to talk to it again.
Yeah.
And I thought back to a couple of weeks ago when I brought it up the first time, and I realized there was a whole other kind of side to the game that I didn't discuss in my first impressions. My first impression was all about the mechanical frustration and like that feeling of like friction and but also that breakthrough. And it was good to like get past that, make more progress. You know, I do that thing where I get to the 3rd level, but at a really high age. So I go back to get through the previous levels at a lower age. So I got more buffer. I did that a good few times because that would get me to the 4th stage. And then I need to get through again with a lower buffer. And I get to the 5th stage and I need to do it again with a lower buffer. So like that was good. And it was a really good reminder of the progress I made from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. And being able to blitz through those levels better and be more proficient and be better and see it. That was great. But there was a whole other side to that, which was the visual and storytelling perspective. It gets quite kind of metaphorical, like mystical almost. There's almost always a paranormal, supernatural side of the coin to every level. In the first level, it's really late. It's only part of the boss fight where you're in a garden. The boss is like tending his garden, and you fight in like the thing and around the pot plants and the shelves. Each boss has like 2 phases where they're like the room shifts, and then it turns into like a bamboo forest. The second level, it gets really more ingrained. It's this nightclub level, and as you move through, you go from being in this nightclub setting to being in like an ancient temple.
Okay.
Like it'll be at the end of a specific encounter when you get the final knockout, it'll like snap and like the world shifts literally that instant, and it's like, what?
Sorry, the Marvel Snap voice line.
Oh, I'm like, does Thanos say that? What is that?
Sorry, continue.
You should have gone for the head so I couldn't snap.
I've been Marvel Snap pilled. Sorry, continue.
It's all right. And so that side of it is really fun. It's really impressive. You know, all of a sudden you're walking through this burning village, and then you beat this sort of this sort of mid boss, this martial arts master, and as you knock that person out, all of a sudden you're back into like the staff cafeteria of this nightclub in the modern day. It's like, whoa, what's going on? And there's never any, this is this person. You know, it's like Resident Evil where it was like, oh, you killed this one of the lords, and this one was the one who made you hallucinate, and now you're not hallucinating, and that's why you were hallucinating.
Right.
And like, it's never like that. You always get to the end of these bombastic fights, and you defeat the boss. And it doesn't matter if you're in a different timeline or if you got there early or late or like how you. It's just part of the experience, and I think it's really awesome. It makes for an awesome experience. I don't really want to spoil one of the other ones, but even just in the third realm is a museum. It's like an art gallery, all for this one person who's the boss of that gallery, the boss of that level. And it's like a big sort of cylindrical main chamber with an elevator that you can't access. And so you have to go through all of the exhibits to go all the way up the chamber. And you're going through what feels like actual art exhibits. Like I find myself looking around and going like, whoa, look at that. Holy shit. Like they put in a lot of effort to make these, and it's very modern and chic. So a lot of the walls are quite plain. It's very white and stark and simple geometry. And then you get these bright like splashes of color, or like a model of a fish in like 20 different cross sections. It's just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's like, whoa, that's really strange and weird. And this waterfall feature and this room full of light globes, and then you can throw the light globes as weapons in that room. And this room where they have, you know, where you're in like a gallery and they've got like boards set up in the middle of the room where they put paintings on either side, and you're kind of just walking around these freestanding boards. Well, in that room, it's sort of a room full of ambushes because all of the enemies are hiding behind those panels, and they'll like punch through them it's a really cool level.
It's like that Pokemon gym in Emerald, I think, which is like the fighting gym. It's got those, and you like some of them have trainers behind it, some of them don't.
Yep. Yeah, I know the one you mean. There's always like a hidden ninja one or something like that in the Pokemon games.
Yeah.
So yeah, that stuff's really good. But I got to the final boss, and like I said, you know, I got there and I needed more buffer. I felt a bit cheated by the final boss in a way, whereas like I finally felt like I understood everything in order to get there, and then they give you the final boss, and he's just far too fucking hard. He's just so hard.
Yeah, right.
I needed 20 years of buffer and like 6 attempts.
Yeah.
To get it. And with a death counter of 0 too. So like I needed like 8 to 10 lives to beat this guy. And when I did beat him, I beat him like after the talisman had been broken. I had no lives left. I had nearly no health. It took me all of that time. And I didn't lose any of my lives in the fight getting there either. It was all on the boss. Which is why I hadn't beaten it when we were talking last week. So when I finally did, I felt a bit like it was good that I did do it, but it felt a bit like, yes, I did get better enough at it that I wasn't dying. I was dodging more. and being more offensive and doing more parries, which are a bit more difficult because they leave you a bit vulnerable. So I did get better, but it at that point it felt like the main challenge of the game was about having enough buffer because this guy was a tank. Like, didn't care about my attacks, couldn't use half of my focus things on him, which then like recontextualized all of my upgrades from the previous levels. Like he invalidates half of the upgrades because I can't go in there. There's no weapons, right? And there's like 2 different upgrade things that are weapon focused.
Right.
And I can't use that, like, you remember that Street Fighter meter I was talking about, that like special meter? You can't use that on him at all. And he's the only enemy like that. And there's 3 or 4. There's at least 2, maybe 3 different upgrade paths that involve your focus meter, which is what that's called. So all of a sudden I'm going through, I'm like, well, forget my focus, forget weapon upgrades. They're going to be useless for the final fight. And to have the best chance, I need better everything else because they're the only things I've got. And so then it felt like I didn't have really much of a choice for how to progress. So I got more and more into it, and then I felt a bit let down by the final fight.
Okay.
It very much wants you to do it again. There are different endings. I think if you get there at a lower age, or maybe if you just do it multiple times, you get a different ending the second time and the third time. You get a bit of it was all a dream kind of an ending, but then you come back and it wasn't all a dream, and then you do it again. It gets a bit esoteric towards the end. I didn't really understand what happened, and I definitely felt like, oh, this must be what it's like to finish Nier for the first time. Like,
right.
That didn't make any sense, and it was kind of boring, and it seems like they just want me to go again.
Nier's a little bit more defined, I think, but they give you some closure with each ending of Nier, I find.
Right. This just felt like, when I walked away from it, it took me like 5 minutes, and I was like, I beat it. Oh yeah, I'll go through the first level again, and then I pause and I close the game. And I'm like, I just beat that game. I hardly even realized that I'd beaten it at that point, because it's kind of like, keep going. Now that you've gotten to the top, you unlocked a new outfit and like the modifiers and cheats tab, and keep going if you want. I'm like, okay.
Right. Okay.
Like, I think I might, but only if the mood strikes me, and it just might not.
Yeah. Is it going to be in your game of the year list?
If it is, it'll only be an honorable mention at most, I think.
Okay.
It's great, and I'm glad I played it. I'm glad it only took as long as it did. I wouldn't have had the patience that, like, I've spoken about kind of Funny's impressions of it, and Tim from there said he put in like 20 hours and he was still on the second or third level, and like I would not have had the patience to have pushed through that.
Right.
Personally, I just that would have done me in. I could not have handled that.
Sure.
I probably finished it at around 12 or 13 hours, which is pretty consistent, I think, with most people.
Okay.
And it's fascinating to look back on and think, they didn't give me that much more to work with. I just got better at it. They gave me the pieces at the front, and they gave me enough of a challenge curve that I had to get better at it with the game as it asked more of me. And it felt like too much at the start, and I got better because I had to. That's interesting. That's really interesting. It in a way that I haven't. I do need to beat Sekiro, because that Sekiro, the way you've described Sekiro in the past, I feel is more uncompromising than something like Dark Souls or Elden Ring. I mean, especially Elden Ring. That game's so open. Like, I feel like there are ways for you to make that game work for you a bit more, or to tweak it.
Yeah. So there's a really fascinating video I watched from Noah Caldwell-Gervais about a year ago, which was the very first time he played through Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, which was hilarious that video was coming out in 2022, or maybe like late 2021, because it's he begins the video talking about that this video has been done to death. Oh my God, I climbed the mountain, blah, 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 blah. But he had a really fascinating point of view where he pushed back on the idea that there is no easy mode in those games. Because his take on it, his read on those games was the difficulty modifier is what level you are. And about if you want the game to be harder, don't level yourself up.
Yeah.
Like there and like which I think was very interesting. Like it and he concedes that it's not quite that simple, and that at no point is he saying that there shouldn't be accessibility options in this game. But in terms of difficulty, the difficulty modifier on Dark Souls is how high a level are you? The higher level you become, the easier the game is. But there's also stuff like, some people went through Elden Ring and didn't want to use the summon because the summon bell, like your companion bell, because they felt it was cheating or whatever. Yeah,
but like it's in there, you can use it, and it does make fights easier.
Yeah, like my difficulty modifier for the first Dark Souls game was I didn't summon anyone. I went through that whole game without summoning anyone, including Orstein and Smo. So like there is less room for that in Sekiro. There is a level system, but it is different, and it is based entirely upon how many bosses you've defeated, and depending on the boss, they might give you a currency that will level up your attack power or not. And there is like a skill tree, but the skill tree, like they give you more moves and they can make you better in some instances, but not nearly to the point where like this fight becomes a cinch.
Yeah,
it's like like you're better at hiding in grass. It's like you've got more moves, but those moves are not going to allow you to win. It's just more variety in combat. So yeah, like Sekiro will feel a lot like Sifu to you, because like there are two moments where you get an additional type of like attack. Like you don't get absolutely everything at the beginning of Sekiro because like there gets to a point where you can deflect lightning because you can't at the beginning, but it's not a like, oh my god, this changes everything. It's just like, no, that specific attack I can now counter.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a fascinating experience.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah. I was also maybe going to talk about Among Us VR this week, but it turns out that's really hard to get a group together for. So when I play that at some point, I'll talk about that.
Getting people to play games and then across time zones, and then who have VR.
Yeah.
And then that tiny little inside of that is that also have/will buy Among Us VR.
Yeah.
Like there's like you need the Venn diagram to line up pretty well.
Yeah, it's pretty small overlap, turns out.
Yeah.
We'll get there one day though. You'll hear our impressions. That's gonna do it for the games we've been playing. When we come back from the break, we're gonna be discussing, is Zelda an open world game? It is, right?
But what if it isn't?
Like, right?
We'll see.
Welcome back to the MiniMapCast. We've been discussing aeroplanes and something else. What else were we talking? Skydiving.
Yeah. Just like
we talking about?
A lot of just plain things.
So much stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a great break. We had a great time.
Yeah, it was great.
We're not going to talk about airplanes anymore, though, because we're going to talk about Zelda. I don't think there's ever been an airplane in Zelda. There's been birds that you can ride.
Yeah. Yeah. There is flight. But, oops. What the fuck did I...
Jeremy, turn shield mode off.
Oops. Sorry. There was a button and I clicked it because it was new.
Don't press the hate raid button. We're not being hate raided.
Yeah, sorry.
Hey, Zelda.
Breath of the...
What conversation were we having where hello cat. What conversation were we having where I said the words, is Zelda an open world game?
I don't remember.
And you said we should save this and talk about it as its own topic.
We were talking about... I have no idea what we were talking about. We were discussing Ocarina of Time specifically. We were talking about, is Ocarina of Time... I think you said, like, we were discussing open world games, but not specifically, but we were talking about open world games, and you had said something along the lines of, like, it's open world like Ocarina of Time is open world. And I said...
But then, like, I think we both had a moment of, like, is Ocarina of Time open world?
Sam might be right. It might be which open world game would you live in? And I think you said, you might have said not Zelda because it's always in danger. Like not Zelda games.
Yeah. And yeah, I think part of the reason why I said that was because those Zelda games from like the ones I'm most familiar with, so like Ocarina of Time through to Skyward Sword, all of those, they're kind of half Metroidvania, you know?
Yes.
Even the 2D ones.
Yeah.
Because it's like, sure, the world's open, but you don't have the hook shot, you don't have the slingshot, you don't have the claw that's the hook shot. Like I'm all forgetting all that. You don't have bombs.
You don't have a hammer, you don't have bombs, you don't have the heavy gloves, you don't have the different armors.
Boots.
Like various items.
So like it's open, but there's a lot of doors that are locked.
Yeah.
And that's what had me going, huh? So the way we're going to discuss this, we're gonna really dive into that feeling. We're gonna figure out what's going on there because we both sat there and was like, I don't know. And when I think about it for a minute, I'm like, yeah, no, it is. And then I think about it for one more minute. I'm like, is it? I can't tell. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about what makes an open world game in general, what you'll see commonly in open world games, what it feels like.
Yeah. So just for like a little bit more broader context, before we started recording today, I threw together a quick little like a one pager for like common things that open world games are, and perhaps how they make you feel, like reoccurring themes, mechanics, things. What makes an open world game? What we know as an open world game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have here common systems in open world games. We have choose your own path. So like, you decide where you go, basically. It's not point A to point B. Like you go from here to here and that is it. Like it is, you can decide roughly where you want to go.
Yeah, you have some non-linearity.
Yes. Systemic encounters is what I've written down. What that means is the potential for enemies or combat encounters or just encounters in general which are not specifically directed or defined. So that can range from walking through the tall grass in Pokemon to you walked through an area and there might be a shopkeeper just hanging out there, or in this specific zone there is a chance that there will be some villains there, or there might not be.
Yeah, or like in that's a bad example because that's coming up. But never mind, I'm not going to use that. I was going to use Breath of the Wild as an example.
Yeah. Fewer loading screens outside of buildings. That is more of a more modern open world thing, but that is something that the open world games definitely try to achieve. Is at least less open world game. Less loading screens in between out of building zones, I think is fair to say.
Yeah, like one of the earliest examples I could think of that you mentioned earlier this year was Jak and Daxter. How you walk around, you don't go to the beach level. You walk past the house and down the rocks, and you're at the beach.
Yeah. Like for example, Mario 64, far less open world because each level is a level, even though structurally the game is almost identical to Jak and Daxter, which is more open specifically for the fact that there is that you can walk from one zone to the other.
Yep. I would definitely not call Mario an open world game.
No.
64.
No.
I think I'd call any of them open world games.
Yeah, like the Bowser's Fury expansion, but that's like a different thing. Odyssey,
like
even
game.
like Odyssey is also not quite as open world because it's still just like bespoke levels. They are like the levels are open, but the world is not.
But there's levels, yeah. And then we get into that open zone nonsense description.
Various play styles, I think is an important one. So whether that can be like, stealth or action is oftentimes, the big two in a lot of these open world games, but also, like, oh, I put a bomb here, or like, I've set up some traps over there, or I've gone in guns blazing, or I've avoided the encounter entirely. There are various ways to approach a situation is definitely something that open world games always try to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Not as A to B in terms of game story and progression. This sort of goes off choose your own path, but a little bit more decided in terms of the order, like which we will get to very soon. But the order of dungeons in most Zelda games is not explicitly defined. You can tackle a large variety of dungeons in the Zelda games in the order that you choose. As opposed to The Last of Us, which is like you will play through that game in order, and doing the levels out of order you cannot do. The game will not let you. Play-made decisions, that can vary between, the classic infamous style, like, are you going to be the good guy or the bad guy? Or, more broad areas like, in Fallout where you can choose factions, you can help different sides attack each other. And then you've also added maps, mini or otherwise. So like, the idea of you being able to see where you've been and see where you haven't been is a very important thing to a lot of open world games. It's worth mentioning that this list is common, not requirement. But what we've tried to do is we've tried to pick things that definitely only, well, like not definitely, but like try to only be in open world games. For example, also side quests is another one that I accidentally skipped on the list. Side quests very big in open world games. A lot of these are in other games. A lot of these things are
like role playing games.
Yeah, RPGs that are like non-open world RPGs definitely have them.
Like The Witcher 2, for example.
Yeah, or even honestly Final Fantasy VII remake.
Yep.
Like that. Like a lot of these things are in that game. That being said, I think it's fair to say if your game has all of these, you are playing an open world game. I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think that there is a game that includes every one of these, or even let's say 80% of them. There's a good chance that game is going to be an open world game.
Yeah.
But there are open world games with.
Can't help but agree.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Why did we bring that up?
Did you say why?
Yeah.
So the reason why is because the question of is Zelda open world? It's very nebulous without that sort of framework to work within. It's just kind of me sitting here going, yes, it is. Is it? It doesn't feel like it is. Why isn't it? It's got this. It doesn't have that, and you get lost in the sort of the going through that thought process linearly. With such a when working within a topic as vague as defining genres and defining games within genres. Yeah, when we come to Zelda as well, we're not just going to be talking about Ocarina of Time. We're going to be referencing what came before it and afterwards as well.
Yeah.
Because it's the same. It's the same game iterated upon in many ways. It's the same design philosophy, the same conventions.
Yeah.
That make it a Zelda game from place to place, but they're all different ways and they all feel different. Some of them are definitive. I feel like if we ask, is Breath of the Wild an open world game? It's not a question. It's so easy to answer. And I feel the same with the very first Zelda game as well. It's definitively easy to answer yes. But when we get to those middle ones, it gets a bit murky, and so we'll get into that.
And I
You've
think
also got written.
There was another thing that I just want to throw in real quick. That just before we started recording, we were trying to decide are we just talking about Ocarina of Time, or are we going to talk about Zelda at large? And I said I think we should talk about all of it. And then I think you said because the first one is definitely an open world game. Breath of the Wild is definitely an open world game. But is Ocarina of Time an open world game? And I said, you need to stop talking right now, and we need to have this on because you had started to just begin the conversation. I'm like, no, like we'll get there. We'll get there.
And you've also got something else written down here, which is what does open world feel like?
Yeah, I threw this together just a little bit, which was there's a level of there's a desire that I think that open world games try and make you feel, which are important to why open world games are so enjoyed and so some of them so revered, and why people really want to capture a game feeling like you're an open world. The three that we've got written down here is the feeling of the world existing without you, I think is very important. Because otherwise it sort of feels like a directed story, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but not an open world more often than not. You want to feel like you exist in a world that already exists. It makes it provides the context for the world. It allows you to believe the world, buy into it more than you might not be able to otherwise. Makes the characters feel like they are having real issues or real problems, and it also makes you care about the world more than you might necessarily if the world only felt like it existed because you were there because of it.
Totally.
The idea that you're an explorer in this world is, again, a common thing. Not always required, but the idea of you being around that world and you being either the first person or, I guess being like, or
the strongest person person able to, an
authority or expert, I think is a thing that is important to an open world game, because there are plenty of open world games where like you get there and like there are enemies already there, but like that world, right? The idea of the world being a character and you being somewhat of an expert, being a friend of that world, makes you develop a stronger connection to the game as a whole.
Yeah.
And you've also written down here, discovering things without the game necessarily telling you about them. Which again plays into that explorer thing, right? Like it's like, oh, like I discovered this, not.
It wasn't this waypoint on the map that I've been following like a crow for the last 3 minutes.
But also the invisible hand of the designer is completely invisible at that point, right? It's like, oh, this artifact was left here for me to find it.
Yes.
Even though it was put there.
This character in the world.
Yeah, but I did that. The agency upon the finding of this object was upon myself, as opposed to, no, the designer put it there for you to fucking find it.
Yeah, totally.
Which is hilarious.
This is a prefab that's placed 16 times. You found 3 out of 16. Yeah, totally.
So
it's and all of that feeds into like those feelings that you would get with an open world are part of why people would want to make one to begin with. Like the idea that you are an explorer. How do you explore a world that isn't open? How do you explore a world where you're surrounded by invisible barriers that you can't walk past, or there's only like 2 rocks to overturn and pick up like 5 coins? Like that's not fun to explore. So maybe that game is far less about exploring, and then it becomes something else. That those mechanics feed into that feeling, which feed into the mechanics, which feed into that feel. It's quite a reciprocative process.
Yeah, and like a good example of a game that does that, makes you feel like an explorer, makes you feel like, you're being the first one there and deciding where to go, is Journey. And Journey is not an open world game. Like that is a very A to B game, and it is designed that way.
Levels.
But it makes you feel like you're the one doing that. But it's not an open world game.
Totally. So yeah, it's fascinating.
Yes.
To think of. So let's keep this framework in mind as we discuss the eras of Zelda.
Yeah.
Like we said, there's
3 main eras of Zelda.
Totally. And some of these are going to feel a bit more clear-cut than others, but it's worth talking about because it all informs itself and each other. So the first era we're going to talk about is 2D Zelda, specifically 1985 into the late 90s. We could say 1998, but around there, leaving room to include like Link's Awakening and the Oracle games and stuff like that.
Yeah, honestly, I'd also include Phantom Hourglass in those as well.
Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, Link Between Worlds is a part of that probably. Yeah. But those are all they're all fundamentally 2D Zeldas, which fundamentally are part of that early. That mid 80s, early 90s, early console gaming boom. And then the limitations that they had to work within. So 2D Zeldas, we've got Legend of Zelda on NES, Legend of Zelda 2 on NES, which I haven't really played and is really hard and really different.
I also think that maybe we should exclude that from this conversation only because, like, Zelda 2 is a weird fucking game.
It is weird and we're not that familiar with it. I can tell you it is open world, though.
Okay, all right. I've not played it. I honestly don't know.
Yeah, and that's fine. And we can just leave it there.
Yeah.
Link to the Past, and then all of the games that are like Link to the Past, like Link's Awakening, the Oracle games.
Yeah.
It's kind of it by that point. And then the ones we mentioned that came out after the 3D games.
Yeah.
The first Zelda game is sort of that's its biggest draw card is how open it is.
Yeah.
How you start not even with a weapon. You can just walk and find and do, and you don't even know what to do. You just do.
Yes.
And if you when you start and you go into the cave, you get a sword, and you can find your sword there. And then you start learning that you can attack the enemies, and you can burn bushes when you find a lamp, and you find this dungeon all of a sudden. And like that is one of the most fundamental open world experiences of all gaming, I want to say. It was the beginning of a change, right? It was. Yeah, I don't know if it was the first open world game, but I think it was the biggest, earliest open world.
Yeah, first open world game probably goes to something like Zork, right? Like, while there was no
or Elite maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, like those games, like the feeling of exploration in that game, while it's funny to think of that game not really having loading screens, because it's more that they can only render so much at any given moment. But it plays within those confines of it's not like it's a defined screen, but you're not going somewhere else. You are traveling A to B. The only issue is it has to redraw the whole screen when you want to get from A to B.
And a great part of that is they show you the screen move from left to right. So you've still got that context. It doesn't fade. It doesn't dissolve and then rebuild, where you're sort of broken out of the moment for a second. Like as opposed to, I guess a modern day equivalent of that would be like cutscenes in like a PS3 Naughty Dog game, where you've got the cut to black and then you're in the game, as opposed to PS4 on, where the cutscenes are seamlessly merge with the gameplay as you move forward.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty genius, and I imagine pretty resource intensive to have the loading screen behave in that way, where you see it the whole time. They can't just clear the cache and reload the whole scene. They got to keep stuff in. They have to make sure each transition from each scene works.
And like there were limitations there, right? When you enter and leave, so when you enter an area, leave it, and then come back, the enemies reset. Like the enemies don't stay dead. They didn't have that level of memory, and it also wasn't designed in that way, right? Like the enemies will always be there every time you enter the thing, which which does not quite feed into our open world design thing, but that is definitely more of a memory thing. But it also makes it feel like the enemies are there even when you're not, which does kind of feeds
into feeling like the world exists without you, right?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It is fascinating how much open world games, like, you can draw that line directly to the first Legend of Zelda game. Like, you can draw a straight fucking line throughout.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go to different dungeons in that game in any order you want, as far as I'm aware.
No, you can for the most part. Like, some of them you need a certain item, but a lot of those items you can find in and outside of dungeons. Like that doesn't have the Zelda trope of, it may a little bit, but not to the fundamental extent that you got from A Link to the Past onwards, of go to this dungeon, you get the key item, you can now do the rest of the dungeon, and when you go out into the world, you can solve new puzzles because you found the key item in this dungeon.
Yeah.
It's more like, I need bombs.
Yeah.
I now have bombs, and that means I can open bomb walls, and those are in some dungeons.
Yeah. Yeah. That game, when you think about it, I don't enjoy playing that game because it's old and
me either, Jeremy. I wish I did,
but it's cool.
Yeah,
it's like
I agree.
That's a cool game,
and for the people who could enjoy it and who were able to push through the limitations and the growing pains. Yeah, the stories you hear of people playing that game for the first time. Pardon me, I sneeze. I'm jealous of them. I wish I could do that as well.
Yeah,
I wish I could have that experience.
I want to play that Nintendo
Experience Ocarina of Time when I was 3. Oh, poor me.
I want to play that remake they made internally at Nintendo. I want to play that. There's screenshots of it. It looks fucking sick.
Didn't someone say? I thought that was playable at some point. That'd be worth looking up.
I don't think it is.
I feel like someone found it. Maybe not. But yeah, if you're not sure what we're talking about, what the designers for Breath of the Wild have specifically said how they brought the game down to its elemental functions and made like a 2D original Zelda prototype using their new Breath of the Wild systems. Well, even just like, let's make the prototype of what the base Zelda is to sort of come back to that really core fundamental open world exploration, that not too guided, just sort of let you loose on the world design, and then put their new mechanics in that, like their I don't know if they put their weather system in there, but their elemental system, like how, if you've got something that's on fire, like a torch or like your shield, and then you run into the river, it puts it out. All of the electricity stuff, how like you can have a metal weapon and that will get struck by lightning if you're in a rainstorm, or it will send a current to a nearby metal object, and so you can run a current through a series of metal objects or a trace in a dungeon. All of that was working in their 2D prototype, which was very original Legend of Zelda-esque. I see you, Cat. You're going to knock that off the desk. I'm not interested. Yeah, and then when you get to A Link to the Past on the SNES, it's very similar. That one is much more directed. You've got to do the first 3 dungeons, and that's where you get that key item sense, where this dungeon gives you the hook shot, and this dungeon gives you this, and this dungeon gives you that. But once you get to the Dark World, it does really open up, and I found myself frequently looking up a guide for just, how do I even get here? And it's like, oh, you need to find this cave to find this rod and then use it on this cliff. That's how you get into the... I was like, what? What did you just... And that's how open that game is.
Yeah.
And like that I find quite obtuse and annoying in its own way, in a way that like it sort of feeds into that old design that we don't find that enjoyable, the two of us. But it also feeds into how open it feels.
Yeah, and like there are your own paths you can decide in that, and it's got a similar thing where like the enemies reset upon re-entering the zone, but you are wandering around this whole world. There are
there are side quests.
There are side quests you can do. There's a lot of exploration. There's a ton of like hidden, the heart containers and other various things, like rupees and stuff.
Very found.
Yes. There's a lot of open world stuff in that one. That game's so cool.
Yeah, it is. Should we go to Breath of the Wild next, or go to 3D Zelda?
Yeah. Look, we can talk about how Breath of the Wild is the most one of this that maybe any game has ever been.
It's the most 2D Zelda that any 3D Zelda has ever been, and it's also one of it's the defining open world experience of the modern era.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Yes. Like, it's. I continue to think about that game more and more as time goes on, as the game that has changed games of the modern era.
You can see its influence on everything.
Yes, yeah, it is. It has dramatically shifted what it means to be an open world game, and also just to be like an adventure game in a lot of ways. The amount of thought and decisions and reasoning behind a lot of the decisions that you can just see, like, it oozes out of that game how much design is in it.
Yeah.
And while still being incredibly not over designed. Like,
yeah, totally. It's really well crafted.
Yeah. And like, the well realized, like what their decisions were, you can see them almost flawlessly execute on basically everything. Like I wish I liked that game.
Yeah, me too, Jeremy. I wish you did too.
Like I've never been so upset to not enjoy a game.
Yeah. You're gonna try Tears of the Kingdom, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm very excited to play that game.
Yep. Just who knows if you'll like it.
Right?
Yep. That's funny.
Yeah,
but yeah, that
to go down that list, there's nothing here that it doesn't have. There's nothing here that it doesn't have in the list that we mentioned.
Choose your own path.
Yeah.
Fast travel.
Exploration, side quests,
encounters.
A to B, decisions. Decisions. Maybe that's the only one.
Decisions in terms of where you go, but that's kind of more like choose your own path. You don't have like factions or there's not really anything like that in particular.
But again, this is not a requirements list. This is if you've got a lot of these, there's a good chance you're playing an open world game.
Yeah. I was trying to think, Jeremy, is Mass Effect an open world game? Because you've got all those open sections, which are quite authored. And you can go to a lot of those open sections in any order and mess around and do what you want, play a choice, choose your own path.
I think not, only because they are specifically bespoke zones.
Yeah, I think it's more like Mario Odyssey, like Sonic Frontiers, like open zone.
Like honestly similar to Outer Worlds as well.
Yeah. You've got lots of open levels.
Yeah.
Even then, their levels aren't that open. It's more like the structure of the game. Anyway, that's a little side note. But yeah, the amount of stuff that Breath of the Wild does, like it is so open. It doesn't hold your hand very much. The way it modernizes that formula, I find so refreshing and fun. I couldn't play that game for 120 hours straight, but I did play that game for 120 hours. It was so fun playing like 30 hours and being like, that's enough for now, turning it off and doing the classic not going back for a while. But then it always pulled me back. It never failed to pull me back for another 20 or 30 hours over a couple of weeks, which I loved.
I never got that.
No.
I would play a bunch. I would play like 10 hours in 3 days. But then it never brought me back. It never pulled me back.
Yeah. Have you tried?
Yeah.
Have you tried going back?
Oh, like not in a couple of years. But
you did for or a couple times.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is how I knew.
That's fine. Like I get that.
It's how I knew I didn't connect with it.
That's my experience with most Bethesda games. I'll get 20 or 30 hours in. I'll enjoy it enough at that point.
Yeah.
But the one time I put it down is the only time I'll put it down, basically.
Yes. No, same with me with the Bethesda games, aside from New Vegas. The one not made by Bethesda.
Yeah. Not written by Bethesda.
That wasn't made by Bethesda. Bethesda made it. Obsidian made it.
It was their engine. They handed off the engine.
Oh, sure.
They gave the Fallout shell to Obsidian.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I know Obsidian did more things in there aside from just write the quests.
Yes. Yeah. Like it was. Yeah.
It's game downsides.
It's a game developed by Obsidian.
Yes.
The Ocarina of Time.
The Ocarina of Time. The 3D Zelda era, 1998 to 2017. Pre-Breath of the Wild. Why was it that when we asked that question, when we said, is Ocarina of Time an open world game? We didn't know for sure immediately. And it's not just that game either, because the fundamentals that you find inside of Ocarina of Time set in motion the way that 3D Zelda games in the future would go all the way until Breath of the Wild, with Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, Majora's. Majora's.
I don't know enough about it to know.
Majora's is so unique.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it to know.
It is open. It's just within the confines of a time loop.
Right.
And then like the tutorial is quite closed. That has so many side quests and ways you can do different things in different orders, though. Not so much of the main path, but everything else around it is so.
It's like Outer Wilds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. It is. But the fundamentals of 3D Zelda, you know, where you've got your early stage dungeons where you're a young kid or you're an inexperienced Link and you don't know everything yet. You go through the early stages, and it usually means, starting town, go to the world, but you can only do so many things. Do the first couple of dungeons, and you go to Hyrule and you go to the Gorons and you go to the Zoras, or maybe it's the Koroks instead in this one, and the Rito. Like that happens in every game, and then you get to the midpoint and something big happens. Like you almost always find the Master Sword by the middle of the game, and then you get to the really hard dungeons, and the world has changed, or a character has like died, or like nearly died, or like you let Ganon loose on the world by trying to save it. Like something big happens, and then you got to do the hard dungeons. All of that is consistent throughout all of those games. Except Majora's, which is quite singularly unique now that I think about it. I should really play more of that game.
Yeah.
The thing about that design, there are things about that design that keep it from feeling as open as the other games. And I think partially because it does feel quite directed in a lot of ways.
I also think it feels somewhat smaller.
How's that?
Only because they were making a 3D game for the first time, and the sets, we'll call them, the bespoke areas that you can walk around in, were limited by hardware.
That's true, and you can notice that especially in Ocarina of Time for sure.
Yeah, it's the first time they've attempted anything like this, right? And so there are smaller areas that make the world not feel very big. But if you were to put it into words, it's pretty similar to a Link to the Past.
Yep.
It just doesn't necessarily immediately feel that way, at least in terms of someone who has not played that game when it came out. I'm sure when that game came out, it would have felt
of modern open world games, of all of your Bethesda games, of Witcher and Horizon and Breath of the Wild, like.
But also like even the Fallout games of old, the original Fallout games.
Oh yeah, like the tactics games.
They felt bigger only because I think you were made quite small in those games, so it made the world feel quite big, whereas like the camera is quite close to Link throughout the entirety of the game. It's not like it's if like the moment the perspective changes on that game, it'll feel different. But like you being a top-down Link in Link to the Past in the original Zelda, it makes the world feel fucking huge because you also are made to feel quite small physically in this space. But because they can only render so much at any given moment, the worlds aren't dramatically big because they just couldn't be.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
But
doesn't mean it's not open.
Doesn't mean it's not open. When you write it down, it's the same thing.
You can go to Gerudo Valley in Ocarina of Time whenever you want. If you're a kid, they won't let you in, but you can go there.
I also was not nearly as familiar with how out of order you can, or rather the lack of direct order you can do the dungeons in Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, there's definitely a suggested order. Like Navi will be like, oh, it's cold. Is something wrong with the Zoras? And when it's like, so that there is an order, but you don't always have to follow it.
Yeah. I think it does not have some of the things that we've mentioned due to just it being the first one, the hardware limitations that we're dealing with. Like it just, there was no.
You have loading screens.
You have loading screens. there's not really many various playstyles. Like you can do things like, use different abilities, but like for the most part, it's like you're Z-locking and slashing and dodging.
Yeah, or like this enemy is defeated good by arrows. Use your arrows.
There's no maps, I believe.
There's a world. No, there are mini and world maps in Ocarina of Time. There are both.
It's been so long.
There is fast travel with your Ocarina.
Yeah.
A to B in terms of game/story progression. I think this is the bit that trips me up the most.
Yeah.
It's because there's an order. It's because there's a way to do things. It's because by the end of the game, you got all this kit that opens the world further. The world is not as open to start with. Even although you can go to all of these places, you can't open the bombable walls. You can't go over to that hookshot target. You can't use your arrows to impress the Gerudos so they'll let you into their town. Like, there's all of those locks.
Whereas, in open world games like Skyrim, there is nearly nowhere you can enter from the beginning of the game. There's nearly nowhere you can't enter. Sorry. The moment you are let loose on the world, right? People famously could beat Fallout 4 within a week and in like 20 minutes or so, because there was a way you could walk directly to the final boss, shoot it, and then trigger the ending of the game.
Yeah.
When in open world games like Far Cry, even like you can travel to the entire world for the most part, and there might be like a single area you can't get to, which is like the end zone, but for the most part you can go wherever you want.
Yeah,
you just got to get there.
Yeah, The Witcher is like that as well.
Right. Okay.
I can't remember if the enemies are stronger in the different areas or if they all scale. I think they all scale.
Right.
Which means I think you can kind of go wherever you want, and it's the quests that are stronger.
Right.
And the quests are like, this area is where you start the level 8 quest, and that area is where the level 15 quest is, and then on the islands is the level 20 quest. Like, I think it's that kind of steering.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I feel like you can just go to Novigrad if you want. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. When you get to these Zelda games, though, especially once you get past Ocarina of Time, where it stops being where it does become a set order. There really isn't a way for you to play the game without breaking it if you want to play it in a different order.
Yeah, and like I think some of that actually does come from A Link to the Past. I think that they do more of that gating in that game as well. But I think the gating is less obvious in that, or at least less strict, because there is a
it's less necessary.
Yeah, you get to the point quite quickly of like, oh, like the game is open and now I can decide my path. Whereas there's about there's like 3 or 4 of those moments in Ocarina of Time, right, where like they're like, okay, now design your own path again, but you're gonna enter this bottleneck and then decide another path and then enter the bottleneck again.
The thing with Link to the Past that always got me was that when you go to the Dark World and there's those like 8 new dungeons for you to do, when you look at your map, the entrances to each dungeon are listed with numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and they blink on the map. It's like, hey, these are the next dungeons. Go to 1 or go to 2. You don't have to, but the order's there if you want. And that's kind of it was that philosophy that it slowly shifted over the games of like, we have a recommended order you do these in, rather than what you got in like Zelda 1, where you like walk into a dungeon and it says dungeon 10 and you're like, why is this so hard? I don't know where any of the other dungeons are. Somebody help me. And
there's usually one they have to do last, I think. Some of them have got items that like I think you need fairly early, but then like I think it's usually like the first 2 you sort of have to do, and then between like 4 and 7 or so you can sort of choose what you want, and then the last one is like, no, like this is the last one, because then that one pushes the story forward.
Yeah, but yeah, the further you get into it, the more funneled you are. And it's funny because I know how linear Wind Waker is in terms of its story progression, but you cannot deny how open the world is. You get in your boat once it lets you go anywhere you want. It takes a good few hours for them to let you loose on the ocean.
Yeah.
But once you are let loose on the ocean, you can just go to any of the islands. The problem is you'll get to some of them and it's like, I can't do anything here. This is just some trees, like some steps that I can't climb with trees on each step. Turns out you need your hook shot to each tree, and then there's a hole at the top, and inside there is a heart piece. Like,
and I think
it's all of that stuff.
And I think the other part that we haven't explicitly mentioned, but I think is very important, is the freedom to return to where you've been. You know, it's not like you leave the area and it's locked off. It's like, you know, it is not, you are in level 3, you cannot go back to level 1 and 2. It is.
Yeah, or like you blew up the space station, and if you missed the audio log and the 2 collectibles in that area, they're gone now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, oh, like if you want to go back to where you came from, you can. And you might get rewarded for it, whether it's like, you know, finding some collectibles you missed, or, you know, even just like
you have a new item that you didn't know you could even do anything with when you were there the first time.
Or even like just rewarded by like, oh, wow, you've been on some great adventures, huh? Wow, you went to this island. That's amazing. I can't believe how far you've come. You know, like that shit, lovely. I love it every time.
Yeah, it's a little reward for the player.
Yeah. And I think that is an important thing in open world games, is to allow you to return and go back to where you have been at least once.
You saying specifically the way you said it just then, they're like, oh, you've been to this place, that's amazing. I feel like you'll see that for the most time. The immediate first thought I had as you were saying that was Outer Wilds. How as you encounter the different astronauts, you can tell them, hey, the universe is exploding, and most of them will be like, what? Don't be silly.
Yeah.
Or and one of them will be like,
oh well,
you noticed that too, huh? Yeah. It's really weird.
Yeah.
But you can tell them each of the things as you learn them. It's like, hey, I went to Giants Deep for the first time. Hey, I went and did this for the first time, and that's really cool. But when I think about the progression in that game's progression is entirely non-linear.
Yeah.
Like, not even in like an open world sense of like, oh, you could start this quest over here and this quest over here. It's like the progression of that game is a net. It's not a line. It's a mesh.
It's a map.
Yeah, and you have to join each dot to its all of its connections. And I mean that in kind of a literal sense, because you get the mind map, the sort of connections map, and that's how you track things and find where there are more things to discover in a certain area and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that's what makes that game, I think, so special. How you have all of those mesh connections, and you can go do a through line in this one place, and it will introduce you to 3 different other threads that you can follow at once. And then you die to ghost matter and you've lost that thread and you forget about it and you go and do that one other thing instead. And then you find something else. And then you come back to that other area, and none of that is wrong. All of it is progress. You could do it in any order. You'll probably do it in one of the most unique orders compared to any of your friends. Like, I'm sure there's not that many unique orders, but like it's at least in the hundreds or thousands, I would say. Probably not like billions, trillions, whatever, because it's designed a certain way. But it's like a lot. It's yeah. I think that's part of what makes that game so incredible. And that immediately feeds into, because there's no wrong answer and because it all works, that heightens that feeling of player-made decisions and play styles, of exploration, of discovering things without the game telling you about them, of the idea of you being an explorer in the world. Like, it's such a...
And the world existing without you, right? Like,
yes,
it is hilarious to walk into a moment.
That game is not about you.
Yeah, but even in the literal sense of the you exploring what is actually just a moment in time, and like
over and over,
but you can count on something happening on another planet, like, you know that happens, and you like, that is part of the puzzle.
And there are times where that happens when you're there, and there are many times where it happens when you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah. God, that game's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So those 3D Zelda games, they are open. There's no doubt about it. But for me, it is definitely that linear game story progression that gives me pause.
Yeah, and like I think, you know, as is a lot of things, especially in genre definitions, there is always room for gray area, where like the Ocarina of Time, like it's an open world game, but it is a more linear open world game, but it's still an open world game. It's an adventure game that has got a whole lot of open world things happening in it, right?
Yeah, definitely. I absolutely think of Zelda traditional 3D Zelda games as action adventure games first as a genre before I think of them as open world games.
I think that is how I feel about it too. And honestly, I would include like some of the 2D Zeldas in there as well. Like the Link to the Past for me is an action adventure game with open world elements and spice.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny. It's so funny because it's so integral to the design and what makes that game special.
Yeah.
But I don't think open world until Breath of the Wild came back, that is. I think with the first game and the second and Breath of the Wild, you could say those 3 games you could say are primarily open world.
Some are more open world than the others. I would also throw Wind Waker in there. Like the feeling of that, I think, is stronger as an open world game, unlike something like Twilight Princess.
Totally, yeah, because that world isn't opened to you for like 15 to 20 hours. Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's a good point. So yeah, that's the discussion, everybody.
There you have it.
I don't know if we really...
The answer is kinda.
Yeah, the answer is...
Mostly.
Yes, mostly. But maybe not predominantly. Maybe not primarily. Yeah. Yeah, that's the answer, everybody. There is the full stop. Thank you for joining us on that discussion. I think, Jeremy, we did... That is the conclusion, but I do think I'm going to be thinking about that for a, like I think I'm going to be thinking about this when I lie in bed tonight.
Yeah, it's thinking about it. Interesting, right? Because I think that, like, this is a larger discussion, but like genres in games are broken, yes. and are never what they should be. Like, you know,
yes.
Could you imagine, you know, like movies, for example, like, you know, genre in movies feeling, not, you know, like it's not like, you know, Fast and Furious are like, you know, action adventure movies. They're not, you know, car racing movies.
I'm trying to think of what's the I'm trying to think of the equivalent for like Souls-like. Like it's a Kane-like.
It's a Kane-like. Yeah, you know, like there are films that are comedy movies. Like that doesn't mean the movie has to be about comedy.
Totally. It's so fascinating when you think of it, where a lot of our genres are defined by the history of the games that have come before them, which is like relatively the same for all genres. But it's just something that you kind of have to have a good understanding of the history of the games that have come before that have led to that. What is an adventure game? You don't really understand what an adventure game classically is unless you've played Monkey Island or Grim Fandango.
And that's because I think adventure, like what we think of adventure games is what we think of when we think of point and click games. Yeah. Which is like, what games on the PC do you not point and click? You know,
yes.
like does Civilization 6 a point and click game?
Is Doom a point and click game? And I would say yes.
But also, like, naming games after game modes or mechanics, I don't think functions well either. Because if I say to my mum, "Oh, I've played this battle royale game," she's like, "What the fuck is a battle royale?"
Yeah, I have to explain it to my mum every time I bring that up.
and
Because of course she's not retaining that. Why would she?
no, it's not a normal thing. Whereas if I say like, oh, a horror game, she goes, oh, it's gonna be scary, and I could say I could say a first person horror game, and she'd understand.
Yeah,
but,
like those are just human adjectives.
Yes, yeah.
Those are just words that already mean things. We should use more of those.
First person shooter could mean anything. That could mean Umurangi generation.
Fuck yeah. Yeah.
That could mean Frog Detective.
I don't think it could mean Outer Wilds.
Well, no, yeah, like, but also first person is not a thing that you say. Like you say first person, but it's always first person blank. It's not like, oh, it's a first person game. I was like
yeah, it's more of that's more of a descriptor.
Yeah, like a military shooter. You know what that is.
Yeah.
Call of Duty being a first person shooter, it's not enough.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I understand. Yeah. Because it's not Doom.
Open world.
It's not Outer Worlds.
Yeah. And like open world game is not nearly enough of a descriptor for what is an open world game, right?
Yeah.
And like, and we touched on that, like Zelda is a adventure game with open world elements and also like role playing game elements.
Mm-hmm.
But like, in what game do you not role play?
Yeah, totally. And what game are you actually yourself?
Yeah.
As opposed to the character on screen that you're controlling.
Yeah, not even in Second Life are you not role playing, because you are still being an online version of that is you, but you are role playing.
Yeah, you're being an avatar.
Yeah.
I feel like a game where you are not role playing, not even like, I was going to say maybe something like Rock Band, like a rhythm game or something like that. But in Guitar Hero and Rock Band, a lot of the time you're playing a character on screen. Yeah. So I think the purest form of that is actually Clone Hero without any video background.
Yeah, or yeah, like, yeah, because Guitar Hero Live, the one which was like a first person.
Yeah, that's a first person shooter, Jeremy.
No, but like what I was going to say is like, it's still a first person version where you're role playing yourself on stage.
Yep.
The only non-role playing game you can do is sport.
What about esports though? Are you role playing when you're a Rocket League? Are you role playing as a car?
Fuck.
Or are you role playing as a remote control car operator?
Apparently, this is so off topic now. Apparently, Psyonix, what's the name of the studio? Yeah. Apparently, they have lore about whether or not the cars are real or sentient or not. Apparently, they have that internally.
I want to know it.
So in Supersonic Acrobatic Rocket Power Battle Cars, there were cars in the audience as like all sitting and watching, and there were like ramps and stuff to where they were going. So people were like, is this like the movie Cars, or are there people inside? And like, I think they mentioned once that they had that written down internally, but they've never shared it, or something hilarious like that.
I want to know. That's fascinating.
There was reason to believe that that all of the cars in Supersonic Rocket Power Battle Cars, they were sentient due to like the structure of the stadium that was built. It was there to facilitate cars moving around as opposed to people sitting.
Because the cars were the audience.
Yeah.
Yep. Man, that's funny. That's so fascinating.
But also, yeah, right. Like yeah.
Well, everyone, we're gonna put a button on that topic right there. Just exceptionally briefly, though, Jeremy. Did you see that new Transformers trailer?
Yeah, I sent it to you.
Oh, true, you did.
I tagged you in it.
So that means you saw the moment where Optimus Prime meets Optimus Primal.
Yeah, I did.
You saw Rhinox and Cheetor.
These are just words.
I'm so excited
for
this movie, Jeremy. This Beast Wars movie. What is this new Transformers movie called? Rise of the Beasts.
Rise of the Beasts, yeah.
And this is what I was when the first Mark Wahlberg one, when Transformers 4 came out and it was T-Rexes and Megatron and whatever. I was like, oh, they're doing it, but they kind of didn't. I never watched it.
And then there was like a little break where they did the Bumblebee movie and everyone was like, oh, we're going to go back to like the basics. And then they did that Bumblebee movie.
And now this is the next one.
Yeah.
And we're getting like war.
That Bumblebee movie was really good.
Yeah, it was. And this is the next one.
Yeah. Who's making this one?
Steve Capel Jr. is the director.
Okay. He directed Creed 2.
Okay, is that good?
Apparently people like it. I've not seen it.
Oh, Ron Perlman is Optimus Primal. That's cool.
Is he?
Yeah.
Primal. Okay, Primal. Yeah, right. He's got a great voice.
Primal.
Yeah, that works. Because they've got all the old voice actors to do the main ones, right? Like that's no.
No.
Okay.
Ron Perlman was never the voice of Optimus Primal.
No. So I mean the main group, like Optimus.
Oh, in the like Starscream and
Megatron. And,
I'm not sure.
Right.
I don't know.
Ironside.
There
was like.
Was Depth Charge one of them, or is that only a Beast Wars thing?
I want to say that might have been in 2.
Because that was one where I remember people being like, "Oh, Depth Charge," and like the characters in Beast Wars had heard of the Transformer Depth Charge. Like there's stuff like that.
There's Bone Crusher, Grimlock, RC,
Grimlock,
Rodimus Prime, Jazz, Ironhide, Prowl, Unicron, Windblade, Cliffjumper, Soundwave, I remember Jetfire, Sideswipe, Mirage, Sam Witwicky, Dinobot, Shockwave.
Black Arachnia, and Silverbolt. You phased into Beast Wars there with Dinobot.
Right. Snarl. Cup.
Well, everyone, all I wanted to say on the podcast, I just wanted to say this live on air somewhere, was when this movie comes out, which I think I'm going to see, if not in cinemas, then definitely when it comes to the digital. Everyone just remember that Beast Wars is the series where Mirage turns into a videotape and starts firing lasers out of his like stealth bomber jet fighter that has in the console a room for him to be a videotape inside of it. Everyone just remember that.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Thank you so much for listening to the MiniMapCast, everybody. That's going to be it for us. We're gonna go to the post show now. If you're with us live, stick around, hang out and chat. We're going to be talking about our Game of the Year discussions coming up in the next couple of weeks. If you're not live with us on Twitch, if you're watching on YouTube or listening on any of our podcast services where we are, which is all of them, if you could give us a positive rating wherever you're listening to us, that would help us out greatly. A like on YouTube, a heart on Spotify, or a tick or a 5-star or a plus helps us out greatly. If you've got the time and the inclination, we'd really appreciate that. You can also head to minimap.com.au to find all of our other work we've ever done for Minimap, as well as this podcast. You can follow us individually as well on all of the socials. Like on Twitter. Jeremy, where are you on Twitter?
At Obi-Wan Jez.
I am at KJPalmer_24. You can find all of the Minimap accounts on Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram at MinimapAU. And yeah, lastly, we just wanted to say, if you wanted to support us on Patreon, you could help us keep the lights and mics on by going on over to patreon.com/minimapau. And for $5 Australian, you can ask us questions to answer on the show, on the podcast, or while helping us out greatly. We'd really appreciate that. That's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back next week to talk about the Game Awards. But until then, stay safe. Have a good week, everybody. And Autobots roll out, I guess.
Autobots roll out.
I was trying to remember the Beast Wars one.
Beast Wars, bitch.